Please help me welcome Kelly Shortandqueer.
After 8 years as a camper at Golden Slipper Camp, I was certain that I would be a counselor. What I didn't anticipate was the tension that I'd experience when becoming a staff member and suddenly be called Aunt Kelly. You see, all of the female counselors were called Aunt, and all of the male counselors were called Uncle. It was meant to create a sense of family, but it also unintentionally reinforced gender. Growing up, as a girl, I was taught that I could do anything. I didn't feel restricted by my gender in terms of the clothes I wore, the games I played, the way I expressed myself. In fact, I thought it was important to be a role model to younger girls about another way femininity could look. I didn't shave my legs, I didn't wear makeup, my clothes often didn't match. Over time, I began to be read as queer more and more, complicating the relationship between sexuality and gender expression. I didn't think that my campers had to look and behave like me, but I wanted them to know there were many ways to be a woman. In college, during the other 10 months I wasn't at camp, I was working towards an elementary teaching degree with a minor in math, because math is awesome, and I have a graphing calculator technique. I spent several years going from being called Miss in the classroom to Aunt during the summer. In a lot of ways, the idea of transitioning was coupled with the idea that I had to give up two of the most important things in my life: teaching and camp. In the end, I put those two things on hold, and around 5 o'clock one morning in October 2003, after lots of tears and exhaustion from talking all night with a roommate, I finally said it aloud: I'm a boy. For the most part, people in my life were either not surprised or they took it in stride. I set up a call with my friend Irene, who started our conversation with, well, I was going through possible scenarios in my head and I figured it out. You're either married, pregnant, or a boy. I wanted coming out as transgender to be easy. I wanted people to change their language, to call me he, even though I looked the same to them as that I did the day, the week, the month before. One of my best allies when it came to changing pronouns was a four-year-old named Wilder. There were several times when some friends and I would be hanging out, and a new person would be with us for the first time. That person would inevitably call me she, and the rest of us would sheepishly look at each other or at our own feet. And that's when Wilder would pipe in. He. A small argument would ensue, and the older of the two would look around for validation that they were smarter than a 4-year-old. And that's when we'd all mumble that Wilder was right. If she wasn't there, I wonder how many times we just let it slide. There are no words for the amount of awkwardness when someone looks you in the eye and says, I just can't get your pronouns right. If you've ever told a trans person how hard it is for you to respect our identities, just think about the amount of trust it takes for us to share that piece of ourselves with you. Imagine what it would feel like to move through your life feeling constantly disrespected or invisible. My decision to start testosterone or T didn't come easily. I thought about it for years before I ever told anyone I was trans, trying to gather as much information as possible. I understood the side effects, looking forward to not having a period anymore, and being nervous about the possibility of being covered in body hair. Both came true. The physical effects of T made more sense to me than the social implications. When talking to my friend Lisa in 2004, she asked what would stop me from going on T. I barely uttered the words male privilege, and the change in her expression made it clear that she understood what was ahead of me. Then there was the question of my family. When I heard about my cousin's wedding, I was nervous about how they would all react to me looking and sounding different. The whole situation was terrifying. A few weeks later, my dad called to ask me if I had heard from my uncle. And just as some background, when I told this uncle that I worked at the GLBTA Resource Center on campus, he later called it the Gay Lesbo Fag Homo Club. Needless to say, we haven't been close. My dad went on to tell me that I was essentially uninvited from the wedding. It was the first time I received a message that my transition meant I wasn't welcome within my own family. My mom, who is now one of my best allies, asked why I couldn't just be a masculine woman. In my head, I pictured a mythical seesaw of gender where the tipping point went from butch woman to effeminate man, which is not how it works. I started taking T in August of 2004, And I can honestly say that my voice dropping was the single biggest change that affected how people perceived me.
In 2005, the day before my first shot of tea. August 16th, the day before my second shot. August 31st, the day of my third shot. September 14th, the day of my fourth shot. September 28th, 2005, the day of my fifth shot. October 11th, the day before my sixth shot of tea. October 26th, the day of my seventh shot of tea. November 10th, the day of my eighth shot of tea. November 23rd, the day of my ninth shot. December 7th, the day of my 10th shot of tea. December 21st, 2005, the day of my 11th shot of tea. January 3rd, 2005, the day of my 12th shot of tea. January 17th, the day before my 13th shot of tea. March 3rd, 2006, 2 days after my 16th shot of tea.
Relearning how to navigate the world was as much about an internal process as it was external. I had to navigate shifting energy levels and emotions. I started to build muscle without working out. I had to unlearn the shame about stray hairs on my chin, because what was once seen as unflattering for me as a woman was gaining me physical compliments as a man. It was confusing. Externally, I was given the key into the boys' club. The misogyny that was often carefully veiled in mixed company ran rampant. It was enough to make me question if a more masculine identity was really what felt closer to the truth regarding my gender. Sadly, I continued to see other trans men behaving in sexist ways, and I don't know if they were doing it just to fit in or if they actually thought it was appropriate. Either way, it just felt gross. On the flip side, everyday things became amusing, at least in hindsight. On my second day on tea, a former coworker and I had a long conversation where he asked me a lot of questions. At one point, he was telling me how he totally sees me as a guy now, and he doesn't want me to take this the wrong way, but he used to think that I was a beautiful woman and that he had been attracted to me. He wanted to let me know that, anything happening between us now is impossible because, I'm not gay. Just for the record, nobody looks any different after 2 days on testosterone. After being on tea for a while, I went to get tested at Denver Health. Having gone in the past for routine testing, I called the number for my results, as usual. I was put on hold for a while and I started to get nervous. I'm not talking about 30 seconds on hold, but it was minutes, which felt like hours. I was convinced that they had to find a supervisor to break some life-changing news to me. And a different person got on the phone and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't give you those results. They're for a woman." I nervously laughed and blurted out, "I'm a transsexual." She responded, "Oh, are you a redhead?" After I hung up, I just had to laugh to myself. First, because it took me a moment to realize that sounding male on the phone now means I'll have to jump through more hoops when my voice doesn't match any documentation that lists me as female. Second, because transsexual actually isn't a word I typically use for my identity, not sure why that slipped out. And third, because my presence in the clinic clearly caused enough of a stir for me to be memorable to the entire staff. For many years, I actively decided that I didn't want to have any kind of surgery. Many people operate under the mistaken assumption that there's a checklist for trans people. Change pronouns? Check. Started tea? Check. Next, surgery? I wasn't sure. Think about transitioning like a menu. There are various options, and people can pick and choose what feels right to them. For example, I opted not to change my name, but I know other people who have. Some friends have had surgery but aren't on hormones. Some people choose all or none of the above. My biggest internal question became, how do I know I'm making this decision for myself and not for everyone else? I wanted to isolate my own feelings, taking out other people's perceptions, comments, questions, etc. After many conversations with my friend Eugene, it became clear that I actually can't separate these. In a lot of ways, my decision was wrapped up in being able to navigate the world in a way that feels comfortable and safe to me. The question eventually became, would this decision be catering to the perception of others or to my own emotional well-being existing in the world as it is right now? If I didn't experience transphobia, would I still have made the same decisions? I actually don't know. My ultimate decision to have chest reconstruction or top surgery did not come from a pressing internal need to make my body reflect an internal identity. What I've come to realize is that I'm living in a specific reality which does include uncomfortable situations and inappropriate responses. My desire to live my life, minimizing the harmful emotional impact of others' behaviors, is both tied up in those other people, but at the core is about my ability to make a decision that gives me agency to feel grounded and safe in the world. I scheduled top surgery for April 2013, and as I shared the decision, I received lots of reactions. I tried my best to carve out my own space, but I felt continual pressure from all the people around me. Before taking time off of work to recover, a coworker asked if I was excited. When I responded with she clarified and said, "Oh, well, maybe excited isn't the right word." As she walked away, another coworker sidled up to me and said, "No, the correct answer is yes." While I know she had good intentions, being told how I feel actually sucked. In trying to be trans allies, I think many people make the mistake of projecting feelings or assuming that one experience speaks to all trans people. I think that my own process of transitioning was partly slowed down because I didn't always see myself reflected in the stories of other trans people. When I thought that transitioning meant that I had to move from point A to point B and could never look back, I was terrified. I thought that I would have to bury and eventually lose my past. While this is a valid path for those who choose it, it's not what I wanted out of transition. Instead, I found myself wearing more dresses and actually learned how to put on makeup after I began identifying as male. When people ask me now how I feel about my body post-top surgery, I'm never sure if I should share my conflicted feelings about it. While I'm 100% sure that I made the right decision for myself, I'm also experiencing sadness and loss. Surgery is a trauma to the body, and while my scars are healing quickly, I still feel like I'm recovering emotionally. What I've discovered is that this is a process, both for me and everyone around me. My mom attended a meeting where she was told that she should mourn the loss of a daughter and celebrate having a new son. She called me from Philadelphia, somewhat confused, explaining, "You really don't seem that different to me." It was the first of many times that I felt seen by my mom when it comes to my gender. You know, I consider myself pretty lucky because of all of the support and the space I've had to create who I want to be. So often trans people are seen as the other, and it seems like non-trans folks think that we won't have anything in common. Ultimately, I'm trying to figure out how to exist in the world, surround myself by people who care about me, and make decisions about my life that leave me feeling satisfied. My process might look a little bit different than yours, but then again, maybe not. It often feels like in order to make that space for ourselves, we have to actually take it from each other. But what I've come to realize is that there's more than enough room for all of us.
Yeah.
Thanks.